you wake up with a toothache. Not an annoying little ache. A deep, pulsing pain that seems to have its own heartbeat. Today, you might reach for a painkiller. But imagine there is no pharmacy, no dentist, no anesthetic, not even a bottle of aspirin. Just you, a painful tooth, and whatever your community has learned about the natural world. And this is where ancient medicine gets surprisingly clever. Because ancient humans did not simply sit around waiting for pain to disappear. They experimented. They observed. And sometimes, they actually found things that worked. The strange part is that some of these discoveries survived long enough to influence modern medicine. So, how did humans fight pain before modern painkillers? Start with something almost every ancient human had access to: plants. Plants were not just food. They were chemistry sets growing out of the ground. Some contained compounds that could affect inflammation, infection, bleeding, or pain. The challenge was figuring out which ones were useful. And that probably meant a lot of trial and error. Some plants made people sick. Some did nothing. And a few produced noticeable effects. One particularly fascinating clue comes from Neanderthal teeth. At a site called El Sidrón in Spain, researchers examined hardened dental plaque from Neanderthal individuals who lived roughly 49,000 years ago. Inside that ancient plaque were traces of plants. Some were ordinary foods, but others had no obvious nutritional value. One individual showed evidence consistent with consuming plants with medicinal properties. That matters because eating a plant accidentally is easy. Selecting a bitter plant that offers almost no nutrition is different. It suggests the person may have known that the plant did something useful. In other words, Neanderthals were not wandering around randomly chewing leaves. They appear to have had some working knowledge of their botanical environment. And then there is the really strange clue. One Neanderthal with evidence of an intestinal parasite also appears to have consumed poplar. Poplar contains salicylates, chemical compounds related to the chemistry that eventually gave us aspirin. We cannot prove that this individual was deliberately taking poplar as a painkiller, but the combination of illness and medicinal plants makes self-medication a serious possibility. And that completely changes the picture. The ancient world was not necessarily medicine versus no medicine. It was experimentation without modern scientific instruments. Then there was another weapon: cold. If you injure yourself, your body launches inflammation around the damaged area. That response helps healing, but it can also produce swelling and pain. Cooling an injured area can reduce blood flow and temporarily numb sensation. Ancient humans did not need to understand inflammation to notice the effect. A cold river, snow, cold mud. Even simply resting an injury against something cool could make it feel better. This is an important pattern in ancient medicine. You do not need to understand the microscopic mechanism to discover that a treatment works. You just need to notice what happens next. Someone gets hurt. Someone tries something. The pain changes. The information gets remembered. And eventually it becomes knowledge. But sometimes pain could not simply be reduced. Sometimes the problem had to be physically fixed. Consider the broken bone. If a leg is fractured and you keep putting weight on it, the injury can become worse. So ancient communities could immobilize damaged limbs using materials available around them. Wood, bark, cloth, whatever could keep the injured body part from moving too much. The astonishing part is that archaeological skeletons preserve the results. Some ancient fractures healed, which means somebody survived long enough for bone to rebuild itself. And somebody probably helped them survive that period. Because a person with a badly injured leg cannot simply walk away from camp and find dinner. They need food, water, protection, and people willing to stay nearby. So pain management was not always a substance. Sometimes it was another human being. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about prehistoric life. We imagine survival as an individual competition. Hunt, fight, run, survive. But an injured human is evidence that cooperation could be just as important as physical strength. If someone was kept alive while they could not hunt or travel, somebody else had to carry part of the burden. Ancient pain management could therefore be social. Food shared, injuries protected, patients watched, knowledge passed from one person to another. And then we reach one of the most brutal problems imaginable: a severe toothache. Today, a dentist can inspect the tooth, numb the area, remove decay, and repair the damage. Ancient humans had none of that technology, but they still knew exactly where the pain was coming from. A Neanderthal molar from Shagarskaya Cave in Siberia is roughly 59,000 years old. The tooth contains deliberate drilling marks. The damage appears consistent with someone using a small stone tool to reach deep decay. The likely goal was to remove diseased material and relieve the pain. That pushes evidence for invasive dental treatment dramatically deeper into prehistory. And this was not a gentle procedure. The decay had reached the pulp chamber. That is the part of the tooth containing nerves and blood vessels. Imagine someone trying to drill into that area using prehistoric tools. No electric drill, no local anesthetic, no clean dental chair, just a painful problem and an even more painful solution. Yet the tooth shows evidence that the individual continued using it afterward. So, whatever happened, the treatment may have helped. And that gives us the biggest twist. Ancient humans were not necessarily better at tolerating pain. They were better at living without the options we take for granted. That is different. If you have a headache today, you can swallow a tablet. If you break a bone, you can get an X-ray. If you have an infected tooth, you can see a dentist. If you need surgery, anesthesia can separate you from the worst part of the experience. Ancient humans had none of those safety nets. So their solution was often a combination of observation, natural substances, physical treatment, and cooperation. Some remedies probably worked. Some probably did nothing. Some may have been dangerous. And some were probably mixed with ritual or belief. But that does not make the entire system useless. Modern medicine itself grew from generations of people asking a very simple question. What happens if we try this? The difference is that today we can test the answer under controlled conditions. Ancient humans had to build that knowledge one painful experience at a time. And perhaps the most human part is not the medicine. It is the refusal to simply accept suffering as inevitable. A painful tooth became a problem to solve. A broken bone became an injury to protect. A useful plant became knowledge worth remembering. A wounded person became someone worth caring for. Thousands of generations later, you still do the same thing. You get hurt. You look for relief. You ask what caused it. And you search for something that makes the pain stop. The pharmacy, the dentist, and the hospital may look completely different from a campfire and a handful of leaves. But underneath all that technology is the same ancient instinct. Pain is a problem. Find a solution. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.